Hello, I'm Gabby Condi from A Cup of Zen, and I'm going to show you how to use Procreate on Apple iPad. So I'm inside Procreate, and the first thing you want to do is create a new canvas. I usually choose 3600 by 3600 because it is the scrapbooking size. And what I'm going to show you is how to create a palette. You can come here to Colors up in the top right hand corner, and you can choose colors using the color wheel. You can also enter in a hex code or RGB if you know the exact color that you want to choose. And in this video we're going to create a mandala. So the first thing that we need to do is look at some color palettes. We want to get a color palette for our mandala for any type of art that we want to create. We want to start with a color palette. So if you go to Pinterest and type in color palette, you can take pictures of your screen on your iPad. So you just have to hold down the top on/off button and the button on your iPad where you can close out the window. So you hold down both at the same time and it'll take a picture of your screen. So I just took a picture of this image with a few different colors and the dog. And you can actually get color palettes that are already ready for you inside of Pinterest, or you might want to choose a photo to collect colors from, like this one. It already has the colors for you, so it's already a color palette, but you can also choose the colors from the photo. So you can also look at illustration art or illustration, or if there's a particular type of artist that you really like, and you can make screenshots of them. You can also save your images to Pinterest and just make a whole collection of images that you really like the colors from. So we're going to use one of these color palettes in our mandala, and you'll see how to create the color palette in the mandala. And making colored mandalas on your iPad with your Apple Pen or even with your finger is just so much fun and relaxing. It's a great mindful activity, and it's helpful to just de-stress at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be like something that you even want to publish, although maybe you do, but it's just a way to unwind at the end of the day. So think of creating art on your iPad in that way. Unless you're doing it for your business, then of course you'll probably have a more business mindset focused on it. But if you just start with just a way to relax at the end of the day, or even to warm up in the morning, then it's helpful for you to find color palettes and just make color palettes and Procreate on your iPad, and then use them for mandalas or any other art that you want to create later. Okay, so we're going to go back into Procreate, and then you want to import a photo. So you want to make sure you're inside your canvas and go to the wrench and then select Add, Insert a Photo, and then you can go to your photos on your iPad and click the one that you want to insert. And then in order to make it bigger, you want to just pinch on your screen and enlarge it just like you would on an iPhone. So now what we're going to do is add a color palette. So go to the top of your color palettes. You'll click the color in the right hand corner up at the top and click the plus sign. And then what you want to do is select this little square that's in the middle of these sliders on the left, and then you use your Apple Pen to select a color, and then you just click inside of the color palette and you drop the color in there. So you can see I'm working on my screen where I'm selecting the little square to select the color, and then I'm selecting the color onto on the screen, and I usually have to tap it twice, and then I open back up the color palette, and then I just click on an empty space next to the next color inside the color palette, and you can see it adds it there. So you can sample colors from all over the image and add them to your color palette. Now what I'm doing is creating a new layer, or actually and then I'm deleting the image off of the screen. So I'm going to insert a new image. And I want to show you how to select colors from an image instead of just the colors at the bottom. So again, you want to select the little square in between the sliders, and then tap on a color inside of the image, and it's the same thing. So I just picked up the house color, and then I also picked up the house color on the colors at the bottom. So you can see that the surfboard and the surfboards and the house color are all the same as the colors on the bottom. So you can select from the colors on the bottom, or you can select from the image itself. And I just added those to the color palette. Then I deleted the image, and now we're going to start on our mandala. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is create guides for our mandala. So you go up to the wrench and go to Canvas and click to turn on the drawing guide, and then you want to click on Edit Drawing Guide. And from here you want to go to Symmetry and Options. So the symmetry allows you to create different things on one side, and then it'll mirage it on the other side. So what I'm doing is changing the grid. Under symmetry, you can change it to a 4-part grid. And then what I'm doing is you can drag in the color so that it fills the whole background. So now what I'm going to do is start to draw. Now I go to my layers, and then I add the plus sign to add a layer. And now you'll see that when I try to go and add a new flower piece, it's not going to work. So I have to go back into where symmetry is and turn on assisted drawing. And now I can add the new flower petal and fill it just like that. And then of course if I want to undo it, I can undo it. But you can click and drag the color into whatever shape you're creating, and it'll automatically fill the background. So now the mandala is starting to take shape and form. And I'm going to add another layer. I go to the wrench, go to Edit Drawing Guide, and then make sure that my assisted drawings is turned on under Options. And then I'm going to choose a different color and just start to add different shapes to the mandala. You can create whatever it is that you want. You might even want to find some mandalas on Pinterest that you really like and just kind of mimic what those are doing. Or just free flow in your creations. If it feels good to make a certain shape with your hand, then just start making shapes and just try to go about creating your mandala as as you're creating it, you know, as you're flowing with the shapes that you're creating. You might want to try doing some points, or maybe you want to do dots, or maybe you want to do flower petals or hearts, or whatever it is that you like to do when you're creating a mandala. And then if you like Zentangle, you could add that to your drawing as you're drawing in Procreate. There's no right or wrong way to do this. There's just being in the moment and making the shapes and filling them with colors, and it's just really relaxing. So now every time I create a new layer, I turn on the assisted drawing guide. So I just created a new layer and I just returned on the assisted drawing guide, since for each new layer the assisted drawing guide is not turned on. So I have to go and return it on. And the reason why you want to create layers is because you can stack the layers on top of each other or behind each other. So if I want to fill that layer that I just put down there with orange color, if I did that and it was the first layer, then it would totally be in front of all of the other colors. So all you would see is just orange. So I could fill it with orange and then move it behind the other layers, and then you could see the other colors and the other shapes, and then the orange in the background if I wanted to do that. So you can select any color that you want from the color palette and just make some shapes as you go along. This is really a fun exercise to do with clients if you're a coach, or if they need to tap into their creativity. So again, I forgot to turn on the assisted drawing guide. So here I am going to turn on the assisted drawing guide, and then I'm going to lay down the new color. If you don't like something, you can always press the undo button. I love the undo button on Procreate and Photoshop and any other program that we have, right? So it's the little arrow that's underneath the sliders. There's an undo and then there's a redo button that's grayed out right now, as you can see on my screen. So the reason why these leaves that I just created are not filling completely is because I didn't close them off. I only created like half of a leaf, but I didn't close off the shape. So that's why I'm trying to close them off here, but it's coming across the whole all of the other layers. So I'm just going to decide to do like a leaf pattern inside these leaves instead of coloring them in. So sometimes you just have to play around with your shapes and with your drawings as you're doing it until you find that right look that you really like. And the best thing about putting it on different layers too is that you can delete a layer. So if you try something on a new layer and you don't like it, then you can just delete it. Plus you can also change the different colors on layers too. So you can do that by filling each element with the color, or you can go to the wrench and you can click on hue and saturation and you can change the slider to make it different colors. So here I'm going to fill it in because with coloring on my iPad, because I didn't close off these shapes. And another good thing about using your iPad for art is that you can change the orientation. So I just changed the orientation so that I could get to these shapes or this side. And then I'm creating the shapes for this side now. And then I'm going to move the layer back underneath the other layers, so now it looks a lot better. It looks more crisp and more uniform. So I'm going to turn on my assisted drawing guide again. And then I chose a new color inside the color palette. And another thing you can do is you can change the size of your brush. The one at the top, the slider at the top, allows you to change the brush size. So I chose a thinner brush. So what I did was I moved the slider down. If you move the slider up, then you're making it a thicker brush size. And the bottom slider allows you to change the opacity. So right now it's set to full opacity, 100%, which means that you can see all of the color. And then if I move that slider down, then it would change the opacity to, half and then even 0 of the color. So if you want a more muted color, then you can change the opacity to where it'll be more see-through. It won't be as bright as it is on the screen. So now I'm going to create a new layer and turn on the assisted drawing guide. And then I just turned up the brush a little bit to make it a little bit thicker. Now I'm going to turn it down a little bit more to make it thinner for this side. It takes a little bit of practice to work with the shapes and with drawing. There are some other tricks that you can use inside of Procreate that come in handy, but we're not going to get to cover them inside of this video, but it can be in a future video that would cover all of those different tricks, especially in creating circles. If you create a circle and you hold it for just a couple of seconds, you'll notice that it'll snap to a circle, to where even if it's like, a squiggly looking circle, one of those little half inflated circles that you'll sometimes draw, especially if your hand isn't steady, then it'll like snap to an actual full circle. So it takes a little bit of practice to get it right, but also the lines will do that too. So if you're creating a line and you want it to be straight, and you can just draw it and then hold it down for just a couple of seconds, and it'll straighten itself. So I always find that really helpful inside of Procreate, because see, like it just did right there for me. I held it down too long and it became a bunch of lines instead of the flower petals. So instead of using a ruler, like you don't have to use a ruler on Procreate, it'll just naturally straighten the line for you. So I'm creating a new layer and I'm going to my color palette. I'm going to choose a new color. And you can always make the screen bigger. If you want to add fine details, you can just pinch the screen and then expand it with your fingers. Just like you would on your iPhone, just pinch and expand out with your fingers and it'll enlarge the screen for whichever area you're looking to add those details to. So I think that drawing on the iPad really takes out some of the anxiety some people feel, when painting in person. I went to one of those paint and sip places before, and one of the ladies that was there, she was very anxious about getting her painting completely correct. That she'd take forever, to paint. So I think this actually removes that anxiety from painting or drawing. So now what I'm doing is exporting the image. So I'll have the instructions on the screen of how to do that. And you can export it to wherever you'd like to save it. I usually save it to either Dropbox or to iCloud. And you can save it as several different files, a JPEG, a PNG, even a Photoshop file. And then you can go back to your gallery view and you can rename it to whatever you'd like to name your art piece. So I'm just naming it Mandala. And then that's it. Good job.